So this is going to be a mixed bag. What do I mean by that? You're going to find out. Okay, so um, I'm going to try and touch a little bit on being intuitive, being sensitive, and people who have accessed different dimensions of creation. Okay, so since we are socially conditioned to have to navigate through a predominantly extroverted world, um, I think introverts feel like outcasts, like we're misunderstood. We've been socially conditioned to believe that a normal person functions as a extrovert. And if you're not functioning like an extrovert, something's wrong with you. You know, nothing's wrong with you. I'm here to tell you that nothing is wrong with you. People have been socially conditioned to believe things are supposed to be a certain way. According to whom? I mean, you know what I mean? Like they tell you, like, oh, you're supposed to drink 8 glasses of water a day. Who made up this rule? And does it apply to every single person on this planet who is completely unique and individually complex and in their own way, you know? So I don't really like, I'm not so static. I'm pretty fluid in the way I function through life. And some people may see that as weird, but for me, it's completely normal. And I've become okay with my normal, not what you think is normal. I'm okay with my normal, which may be weird to you. Tomato, tomato, it's all open to interpretation. It's all open to perception based on how small or how big your mind is, Like, are you still looking through like a little pinhole or have you like opened it up? And that's the thing, like people who are still stuck in social conditioning stay in a sphere this big, right? And so they can't see beyond that, and you can't expect them to because that's where they're at. It's all about like um just like respecting the diversity, finding harmony in diversity, pretty much. But anyhow, so introverts are perceived to be weird or not normal because we are not functioning to social norms. I'm sorry if that doesn't make sense, whatever. Also, I think introverts, because we are wired differently, we have a tendency to function differently, and we have a tendency become to become highly sensitive people, you know, who can kind of enter the more subtler realms of the mind, which could be deemed as psychic, but in actuality, you're just like a finely tuned instrument that can like tune into things that most people cannot because they're still really, really immersed in the denser realms of creation. Like when you're stuck in like a denser, lower vibrational realm of creation, of course you're not going to be aware of the subtler, more ethereal aspects of it, right? But I think like introverts have the ability to tune in to or hone into these subtler like aspects or spheres of life because we give ourselves the time to do so. We're not immersed in constant activity. We're not immersed in fragmenting our energy by overstimulation and over socialization, right? So we have a tendency to just kind of like give ourselves the time to contemplate and to delve deeper into like I said, subtler realms of creation or existence. And then we can see things and notice things and feel things that most people are oblivious to. And that's the thing, like, I was talking to a friend of mine and She's an INFJ as well, which is, let me tell you, a breath of fresh air because we could spend hours together and we understand each other's language. We can kind of like understand each other non-verbally, and it's just like a really like fluid conversation. There's no forcing, there's no tension, there's no misunderstanding, and we can kind of understand and relate to each other's experiences, you know? Whereas if you talk to someone else who haven't experienced it, you know, it would be foreign to them. There'd be a huge disconnect, huge misunderstanding, and it would just be like, okay. And that's another thing. Like, I feel like introverts seek to understand. We seek to understand, whereas some of the other personality types, they don't really seek to understand. I think that's why we're known as good listeners, because we do listen, and we listen intently because we want to understand and we want to see you and we want to see the full scope of something. You know, we don't want to just kind of see what we want to see. We want to see you, and we want to see full scope of things. We don't want to just kind of see it from a one or two or three dimensional viewpoint, you know? Um, so yeah, like because we have a tendency to spend a lot of time by ourselves, contemplating, we can access different dimensions of existence that most people haven't experienced yet. And so, like, sometimes the things that we say or see or perceive or have experienced seems weird or foreign to others. It's because they still haven't experienced it yet. They're not at a place to access these things yet. And so the things we've experienced seems far out to other people, you know what I mean? But that doesn't mean it's invalid. You know, it's funny. So, as I was having this conversation with my friend and we were talking about this, um, like how some people claim to hear voices of their ancestors, or they have visions, or you know, um, I don't know, you can access your sixth or seventh or eighth sense or whatever. You know, if you were to tell this to someone who hasn't even opened these aspects up, they're gonna look at you like you're fucking loony. But that's because they've been conditioned to suppress their gifts. I feel like we all have gifts, and like, oh my God, like I can see so many different like topics that connect to one another, and I don't know quite how to relay them to you. But basically, so we've been conditioned to be extroverts. And if you're not an extrovert, something's wrong with you. And if something's wrong with you, we're going to have to give you some drugs, or we're going to basically make you feel like an outcast so you convert, So, like, my whole thing is like, it takes so much courage, okay, and so much resilience and so much will and determination to just continue being who you are and being strong in yourself and not doubting yourself just because someone else can't see you or understand you as you are. You gotta like think, like, I want to say 80% of the population doesn't want to understand you. They've been conditioned to be extroverts. They've been conditioned to distract themselves. So they don't know how to actually sit quietly with themselves, let alone with another person, to understand them. And, and that's okay. That's where they're at. You can't, you just gotta like respect everyone where they're at, irregardless of how you think they are or should be. You know what I mean? Like, I think like a lot of people, like, they struggle with this. They expect people to be a certain way, to understand them, but somebody can't understand you unless they've experienced it. It's all about the experience. That's what I've noticed. Like, if someone hasn't experienced it firsthand, they won't be able to make the connection. You know what I mean? And it's one thing to read something in a book, another thing to hear it, but to actually experience it. That is where the pearls of wisdom are distributed, and that is where you acquire tools and knowledge and, all these different beautiful things that make up you. You know what I mean? But anyhow, where am I going with this? Hey man, nothing's wrong with you. In fact, if people think you're crazy, I sometimes think they're crazy because they're like still living here. They're still living here instead of like here with, like creation is this like limitless, eternal thing, and they're only concentrating on this. And that's fine. Maybe that's where they're at. But they're missing out on so much. And then, they have the audacity to say that I'm crazy or you're crazy because you are the way you are when you are beautiful. You are like accessing these different dimensions and realms of being that most people haven't even discovered. You are like taking the road less traveled, you know what I mean? Like setting your own path, taking yeah, taking the the path that most people fear to tread upon. So, whenever you feel misunderstood, that's okay. You should look at it really as a beautiful thing because that means you've explored areas that most people haven't even touched yet. Anyhow, I'm going to stop rambling. If you learned something, great. If you didn't learn anything, that's great too. Just embrace yourself. Know that you're beautiful and you have eyes to see glorious things and the courage to explore regions that most people will never, or it will take them a while to get to see. You know what I mean? Anyways, yeah, I'm going to stop talking. I ramble too much. Blessings to one and all. Amen.